Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 21 team selection. As you guys know, Game Week 20 is still going on, so I'm still waiting on the results of some players such as De Bruyne playing to finalize whether I actually get a green arrow this week. I obviously still have the triple captain on Holland, so that would hopefully be a good result versus Spurs, but I'm not too optimistic about it. Definitely probably not the best play of the triple captain, but we know it is the weakest chip in the game respective to the wider impacts of your FPL season, because a wild card can last and actually strengthen you over multiple game weeks. A bench boost, of course, can be much stronger in terms of just the amount of players you get involved. And so I'm not too worried about this triple captainship. Yes, it's a bad play, but that happens in the FPL season, so you kind of have to move on. United have looked exceptional. Holland didn't get many chances, and overall, I think City have also dropped off in terms of their quality, specifically when Foden's actually playing on the left now. I do think the side is much better with Grealish in, but that's not really relevant for now anyways. As far as future planning, I would say, especially even from thinking about Game Week 21, the reason why I've actually shown a graphic of the potential Game Week 25 blanks is because of how important these blanks are. And just talking about it, the highest probability based on cup fixtures and overdogs winning in the future and some of the FA Cup ties is going to be the impact of therefore a blank for Newcastle and Brighton and Manchester and Brentford. Why is that important? Because a lot of us have assets such as Tony, or even have moved into Mitoma and March from the Brighton team. So that's already one or two assets that some owners already enjoy within their FPL teams. But then speaking more in terms of wider ownership, you have Newcastle and Man United assets that are going to be heavily impacting our teams. A lot of us now are in a structure where we own four of these players just between Newcastle and Man United at the very bare minimum. You probably already have some sort of structure like a double Newcastle defense, or at least Trippier plus Almiron. When you're talking about United, I think a lot of people have at least doubled up in terms of Shaw and Rashford, and maybe have a triple up with either Fernandes or another kind of second defender, or Anthony Martial, sort of in my case. I actually have four of these players now, and I'm already thinking about the wider impacts of Game Week 25, because at this point in time, if I bring in a Brighton asset, if I bring in another Newcastle defender, that actually makes me in a bit of a pickle when I'm planning for Game Week 25. It just means I have further blanks. I might even need to take a hit that week, and I don't really want to do that when I can future plan ahead, because other teams and other players have good fixtures. A good example, for example, is going to be a team like Leeds. You've got forwards and you've got midfielders from this Leeds team that you can invest into. Rodrigo is a great example of that. Nonto in the forward position is also interesting because of how cheap he is price-wise. And I think you could move into those assets, specifically if double Game Week 22 is confirmed. That would really enable you to get away from that blank and actually sidestep that without actually having to go into the priority transfers this week, which a lot of people seem to be regarding as the Brighton midfielder in a very usual template setup. So moving on to the rest of my team, though, I would actually like to show you what my team would look like if I was rolling this week. And the reality is, it's a very weak team. I actually am going to be putting Shaw on the bench because I do think Arsenal will actually win this match. Once again, this is sort of betting against the team playing against Arsenal. I know I suffered previously from doing this by actually putting Trippier on the bench in Game Week 19. Of course, that was a mistake, but I didn't anticipate Arsenal to also keep the clean sheet versus Newcastle, which they did. I would actually suggest that Arsenal are probably a much more strengthened team when you compare to their last previous meeting where Casemiro was playing. But of course, Partey, on the other hand, when we talk about how important a DM is for the team, Partey was missing in that game in Old Trafford. Now you also have Arsenal at home. They've been an absolute fortress as well, and I do really think that this Arsenal fixture is going to be a great time for them to hopefully cast revenge on United, and I'm expecting for Shaw to actually lose his clean sheet here, much in the same case that he did in the City game. We're also now seeing Shaw play in the left center back position, and just to mention, of course, I actually did end up going Shaw, if you did miss that out on the live stream, just simply because the Stones transfer was closed. And I didn't really like the idea of going into Ake this week when I have the upside of going for Shaw in a Crystal Palace fixture. So that's kind of why I went for that and sidestepped John Stones, because in my opinion, John Stones is potentially the first kind of priority centre back right now in the City setup, and I think Ake is not exactly at that same level. We also saw Cancelo play on the left back position, so that also means that Ake's position in terms of the team is not certainly nailed. You can have Diaz back in the team, you can have Stones back. That's going to weaken Ake as an asset going forward. So I do think it's nice that I've sidestepped that transfer. I have the option of going for something like Kepa Ederson, but I don't think that's a very sexy move, if I'm being honest. There's also the alternative of going into something like Rodrigo this week because he has a good fixture on paper versus Brentford. But I would like to kind of cast your eyes towards some of Brentford's defensive statistics lately. I think they've actually played really well. And a lot of people have also been rewarded by going for these Brentford defensive assets simply because players like Raya and Ben Mee have shown a lot of form. And I would suggest that this Leeds fixture, even though Leeds have been a very capable team in terms of actually scoring consistently game to game, it does make the Rodrigo pick this week a little bit less interesting unless double game week 22 is confirmed. That makes Rodrigo much more appealing if I go for a transfer like that. However, when I actually think back about my team, one of the big problem points in my team is if Martial is unfit, specifically with the Crystal Palace game. And therefore, my option, in my opinion, is actually to go for something like a Martial back to Darwin transfer and then future planning so that if double game week 22 happens, or maybe even if it doesn't, I could actually go for Fernandes in game week 22. This is, of course, the structure right now, not considering the additional Leeds game in game week 22. But I do like the idea of being able to go for Fernandes as a single transfer anyways in game week 22 if I move into Darwin this week. And that's specifically if Martial has an injury issue, and also if we get confirmation from Klopp that Darwin is actually ready to play in game week 21. So those are my thoughts right now. And the reason why I would like to go for this transfer is even though this Liverpool-Chelsea game is a bit of a tough matchup, you have a situation here where I would say Darwin has actually increased the level of this Liverpool team. From an offensive point of view, I think they lack the offensive edge when Darwin's not playing, and I think he's pretty much the most essential forward for this team right now. Of course, some people will point out Salah and, of course, his historical strength for this team, but I think Darwin has been the most impactful, most threatening player as of recent memory. And I have to say, of course, he's shown some really, really shocking finishing, but it still is a transfer that tempts me because the Chelsea team have given away a lot of chances. You can go back and look at the highlights, for example, even in the Crystal Palace game, a team that actually also struggled to score for Spurs, but actually created very lively chances. They did much the same versus Chelsea, and I do expect the Chelsea team to give away lots of chances to a team like Liverpool, specifically a Liverpool team that plays at home at Anfield. So that's kind of why I'm tempted towards going for a Darwin move. I hope that he's fit for the game, and therefore I'd be able to move away from Martial. And that's simply also because Martial is slowly becoming a weaker asset. You have Weghorst, who might actually take away that starting position from Martial. And just because he's actually shown so many issues when it comes to being able to stay fully fit, I just think that Martial's limits are just naturally limited. You saw, for example, in a game where he seemed okay for the first half in that previous fixture in the Manchester derby, that he was still taken off at halftime for Antony, who I didn't think necessarily had a great second half, but Martial was simply not able to continue the match, at least under Ten Hag's impression. So that already suggests to me Martial's asset and his ownership in my team is really dwindling in terms of how long he's going to last in my team. So that's kind of my thoughts for Game Week 21. For now, I'm actually set on the kind of roll that I was talking about. So I'll be sticking with this structure here and rolling ahead. And the reason why rolling is interesting when I actually finalize and go back to why I've come to this conclusion is because if you actually follow Ben Crellin on Twitter, who's of course the best planner in FPL, he does suggest that we might get some double game week news a little bit later. So therefore, planning around double game week 22 probably requires a roll in game week 21 if your team is in a good state. And the reality is, even though it's not optimal to have these United and Arsenal players playing versus each other, specifically when you have defenders from both teams, is simply put, everyone owns these assets, and it's not really a huge problem to own specifically some of the attackers from these, because their chances of doing well are probably a little bit higher than some of the defenders. Now, of course, we can see it in Newcastle and Arsenal 0-0 situation, but I'm tempted to think that's not going to happen. And therefore, probably my only 50-50 this week, if everything goes to plan and Martial actually seems to stay fit and keeps his starting position, is maybe whether I play Kepa or Ward. But I still like Kepa and his chances of getting kind of save points, whereas this Brighton team were really threatening last week versus Liverpool. So I'm actually quite scared about what that bodes for Leicester. I think they could actually concede a lot, whereas this Liverpool team have still been rather unclinical. And if Darwin's out, then I'm probably 100% going to slam Kepa into my team. And that's going to be my team selection, so I hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead. As I said, some transfers as possibilities being Kepa to Ederson, a little bit dull, a little bit boring, Andreas to Rodrigo if double game week 22 is confirmed, or just simply going out of Martial to Darwin or rolling. So those are the options in my mind. I'm mostly leaning towards a roll unless we get some additional news early on before the Game Week 21 deadline, but I hope you guys have a wonderful week.